This might get some people upset. I think Bitcoin has lost the plot.
I think Bitcoin is so played out. There's no incremental buyers of Bitcoin. And I think people have essentially ended the game of Bitcoin.
Two billionaires separately said the same thing this week. The Bitcoin trade is over. Mark Cuban and Jason Calacanis aren't just billionaires. They're two of the most connected guys in tech and finance. Are they right? Every year on May 22nd, we celebrate Bitcoin Pizza Day, and a guy named Laszlo, who bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, which would now be worth $775 million. But is that day over? Maybe Bitcoin is no longer the asset that will retire your entire bloodline. Maybe there are no Laszlos in the future. Some people might disagree with you.
Do you realize there might not be a single more important thing in the history of mankind? We're changing the entire financial system.
So who's right? The billionaires or the Bitcoiners? Was the Bitcoin dream just for people who were lucky and crazy enough to invest in it early? Or is there actually still a supply squeeze coming, with a congressman introducing a bill to make Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset and allowing the United States government to buy 5% of all Bitcoin? Will our $39 trillion debt problem ever come back to really bite us? Or is that just a scare tactic made by people who want us to buy Bitcoin and pump their bags? If you're not sure about whether you should be a buyer or a seller of Bitcoin, this episode is for you. We got a lot to cover. This is Dante Coke with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go. There's a post on X right now from my friend Neil Jacob that absolutely blew up with 2 million views. It's a clip from Mark Cuban, the billionaire, the former owner of the Mavs, saying what a lot of people have been thinking about Bitcoin, except he just said it out loud and the dude has a lot of money.
This might get some people upset. I think Bitcoin has lost the plot. And when I started buying Bitcoin, and I've sold all of it, except not all of it, most of it, it was because when all the shit hit the fan with the Iran war, and Bitcoin was always the best alternative to fiat currency losing its value. And I always thought it was a better version of gold than gold. Well, gold just blew up and went, to $5,000. Bitcoin dropped. And every time the dollar dropped, Bitcoin should have gone up. Because if it's priced in dollars, it was cheaper. So anybody from around the world could go pay in dollars, and it just didn't do that.
Not such a hedge.
No, it's not the hedge that I expected it to be. And that was really disappointing. And so I'd say I'm more disappointed in Bitcoin, not as disappointed in Ethereum, and the rest, the token stuff, the meme coins, garbage.
The disappointment has been real. It's always true in bear markets, but even more true in this bear market. The narrative was supposed to be that Bitcoin was some hedge against inflation after seeing what it did during COVID with the money printer. It's supposed to zig when everything else zags. It's supposed to be the absorber of global liquidity. Well, after 5 years, it's grown about 20% a year. Nothing crazy. Not like what people are hyping up. Our debt is still out of control. We have $39 trillion worth of debt, and the M2 money supply, which is supposed to be a barometer of Bitcoin and its price going up, has risen from about 100 trillion to 141 trillion over the last 5 years. But what has that done to the price of Bitcoin? Almost nothing. And to throw salt in the wound, this is Pizza Day. A day where we hear about a guy who bought 2 pizzas worth $775 million.
Just posted on the forum, I said, if anybody's interested, I'm offering 10,000 Bitcoins in exchange for some pizza. And somebody there said, hey, I'll take you up on that offer. So I sent him the 10,000 Bitcoin. I said, okay, here it is. I'm waiting for my pizza. And, he phoned it in, he paid with his credit card, and the pizza showed up at my door.
There's this logic out there that there's no more buyers of Bitcoin and Bitcoin is old news. This is exactly what Jason Calacanis believes. And he's a guy that spots trends early. The billionaire is one of the first guys in Robinhood and Uber and Wealthfront. And he thinks that Bitcoin is old technology. It's old news, it's played out, it's going to get passed up for other, better financial products.
I think Bitcoin is so played out. I think everybody has some exposure to it who would have wanted exposure by now, that there's no incremental buyers of Bitcoin. And I think people have essentially ended the game of Bitcoin. Now that it feels like there are so many other alternatives, and on a functionality basis, there are tons of legal stable coins that make it easier to move money around at a lower cost. Yep. On the other side, if you're looking for something interesting, BitTensor and Tau and Solana feel much more interesting in terms of where the entrepreneurs are placing their bets and building things around it. And Bitcoin feels stale. And I said Bitcoin zero was, a distinct possibility. And I said that when Bitcoin was at 10, 50K, everything in between. Why? Well, all technology eventually deprecates, with very few exceptions we've seen in our lifetime. Like, yeah, sure, there are still people running systems on Fortran or something. There are still people running on mini computers here and there. But
here's a CNBC article from Wednesday, January 24th, 2018. Says, quote, there's a 33% chance that Bitcoin goes to zero. VC.
Yeah, so
Jason Calacanis says.
I do think that that's still something people should keep in mind. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but if there is a better system or a new game, if you're a speculator and you feel the game of Tau or the game of Solana is a more interesting game, more interesting energy there, why wouldn't you move half your Bitcoin over or a third of your Bitcoin over? That creates downward pressure.
Bitcoin is stale. Bitcoin is old news. Bitcoin is played out. I wholeheartedly disagree. This is a short-term view and perspective. We're moving to a digital world, a world that's borderless, a world with more geopolitical conflict, and that we're moving to a multipolar world from a unipolar world. The financial world that we lived in is going away. There is no more cash. There will be no more ATMs. A new system must be built, and Bitcoin will be the foundation of that. My views are very similar to Jordy Visser's. Listen to what he had to say on a recent podcast.
Because the reality is it's the new technology to deal with the world we're going to be in, plain and simple. Tokens to me and what's happening on crypto, I guess when I say the financial guardrails are changing, everyone in crypto is kind of like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, all right, do you realize there might not be a single more important thing in the history of mankind? We're changing the entire financial system, has been set up this way, honestly, for thousands of years. We're talking about doing everything digitally, everything. We're talking about instant settlement, cross borders. It has implications for getting rid of the borders. This country thing, it doesn't exist in the world that I see. In 20 years, between stable coins, all of the financial guardrails you can't have currencies. You can't. So it is this merging. Governments will try and fight it. The capitalist system will try and fight it, but that's not the way it's going to work. The banks are losing. The governments are losing. The people are winning, and they want something where things can exchange.
The new world is digital, it's borderless, it's permissionless. Countries will not be taken out by someone else who controls the financial systems. New rails will be built upon stablecoins and Bitcoin. And Bitcoin will never go away. Not just because it is the best settlement network in the world that operates 24/7 without a central party or actor, but it's because it's more than that. It's a belief system. And beliefs never die.
To what I said at the beginning, Bitcoin is a narrative. It will always be a narrative. It's something that the world believes in. It has been chosen. It has a moat because belief is harder than fundamentals. Fundamentals come and go. Belief systems don't come and go. It has survived many, many bear markets. So it is in the stage of a long-term acceptance. The problem is it needs money. And like I said, if you've got the opportunity to invest in things that have 5 baggers and 10 baggers, and there's dollars flowing behind them and fundamentals behind them, and then you think about all of the money managed in the world, it's by human beings still at this point that are in the traditional finance world, and it's doing well. So I think the one thing people should take out is that every single thing you mentioned, whether it's energy, commodities, SanDisk, I mentioned Micron, I mentioned Intel, they have one very common thread to Bitcoin, which is those are all scarce assets. All of them right now have shortages. They have bottlenecks. Bitcoin is a scarce asset. It's also an abundant asset, meaning it's built on code.
It's open source. It cannot be stopped. It's built on beliefs and it's built on code. A code with a fixed digital supply that continues to be bought up by people every single day. And what happens when that belief in that code gets written into law by the United States government? When the United States government deems Bitcoin as strategically important. That's what Nick Begich from Alaska is proposing with the American Reserve Modernization Act, where we allow other assets, digital assets, sovereign assets like Bitcoin to be bought by the United States government. And how much? 5% of the entire supply.
In order to maintain the sovereignty of the U.S. dollar and the strength of the U.S. dollar, you've got to have a strong reserve policy. That's why central banks around the world for so many years, thousands of years in fact, have held reserves on their balance sheet. We need to recognize that digital assets are the 21st century equivalent of those historical gold reserves.
So Begich wants the government to stockpile 5% of all Bitcoin, which is equivalent to how much of the world's gold the U.S. stores and reserves, and he already found a way to fund it without taxpayers. The Treasury is currently sucking up crypto assets tied to Iran through Operation Economic Fury. Begich's plan, seize the Ayatollah's crypto and drop it straight into the U.S. balance sheet. But he warns the GOP cannot afford to drag its feet. Conservatives have a tight 6-month window to pass this bill and lock that into law, while Republicans still control both houses of Congress. So, of course, as we know, the clock is ticking with the midterms coming up in November.
Bitcoin is viewed as an asset that has value to nations, that has value to people, and that will have more and more value as we enter a regime that's filled with debt and geopolitical conflict. That's why you shouldn't sell your Bitcoin. And that's why you should work with someone like Ledn, who will allow you to borrow against your Bitcoin stack without selling your Bitcoin and not getting any capital gains in the process. Ledn allows you to borrow up to 50% of the Bitcoin value you post onto their platform in less than 6 hours. You can pay off these loans at any time, and your Bitcoin is never rehypothecated or lent out. It's held in cold storage. Rates start at 9.9 to 11.5%, and the application takes just 2 minutes. Use the link in the description or the QR code to get started with Ledn today. Never sell it. Borrow against it. Take out a second mortgage.
The only use of time is, how do I buy more Bitcoin? Take all your money to buy Bitcoin. Then take all your time to figure out how to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin. Then take all your time and figure out what you can sell to buy Bitcoin. And if you absolutely love the thing that you're doing and you don't want to sell it, go mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin with it. And if you've got a business that you love because your family works for the business, it's in your family for 37 years, and you can't bear to sell it, mortgage it, finance it, and convert the proceeds into the hardest money on earth, which is Bitcoin. Buying Bitcoin with cash was not enough for you. You had to go to the next level and issue shares and debt and find every way to accumulate more dollars to buy more Bitcoin. And then you had to onboard the world with you. Why?
If you're living in a hyperinflationary economy and the currency melts down, the bank fails. You know, it happened in Germany, it happened in Argentina, it happened in Brazil. It doesn't matter how hard you work, right? People were basically bringing wheelbarrows of money, $20 billion, so 20 billion marks to buy a bar of soap. So working hard and not thinking about monetary theory and not understanding money isn't a solution. The ruling class would like you to work hard and not think about these things, right? But if you want to create wealth or preserve wealth, it's not enough to just work yourself to death, you know. And I can give you lots of examples of that. Now, if you look at the wealthy, you know, a wealthy real estate investor, they would go and get a loan and they'd borrow money at 5 or 6% and they'd invest it in a building and they would generate a 10% return and they would capture the difference. And, you know, if you want to make $1 billion, you borrow $1 billion, you use it to build a building, you keep 80% or 100% of the equity, you put the rest 80% of the building as debt. So maybe you have $1.1 billion building and you find a way to raise $100 million of equity and you have $1 billion of debt. And then the money supply expands at 7% and the building increases at 7% a year. And that means after 10 years, the value of the building's doubled. So in 10 years,
make the spread of the appreciation of the asset minus the debt and the liabilities that you have against the asset that you're borrowing in for. That is the play that Michael Saylor is talking about. And he's saying that Bitcoin is the new real estate. It's what everyone was doing in the 90s and early 2000s that made them rich. Bitcoin is the asset that people are going to want in a hyperinflationary world. That hasn't changed. And if you haven't looked back at what happened in the 70s with inflation, It looks a whole lot like this decade that we're moving into. A supposedly short war that drags out much longer than you think. Potentially corrupt administration. That decade was the 70s that went into the 80s and was a decade where we saw inflation absolutely crush anyone who didn't own assets. Scarce assets. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And this feels a whole lot like that. So despite what Mark Cuban has to say, despite what Jason Calacanis has to say, Bitcoin is the asset of the future. There aren't going to be other products built on top of it. Look at what's happening with Ethereum right now with people leaving the foundation left and right. The promise of these other assets is no longer true. There was going to be other protocols and platforms other than the internet. But look at what we use every day. The single protocol that was deemed a Ponzi scheme that was almost outlawed by the United States government, that was adopted into law, that became the foundation of the largest tech companies in the world that are headquartered and domiciled in the United States, which has single-handedly brought wealth to all of our stock portfolios and to every single one of us today. Bitcoin is the new internet. It is the new digital real estate. So should you sell your Bitcoin and listen to Mark Cuban? I don't know. Maybe you haven't been listening for the past 15 minutes, and maybe you haven't subscribed to the channel. Maybe you don't understand that Bitcoin isn't just a fad, that there will be more Laszlos in the future, and that this is the opportunity where the financial system is changing. Maybe you don't get that yet. Maybe you do. And if you do get that, maybe it's time that you take a little bit of precaution and start to learn how to protect and hold the asset that everyone says is going to be so valuable. It's like an umbrella. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So understanding how to run a node, how to maintain your privacy, how to hold your own keys sovereignly is a tool that you need to understand. Don't just do it on your own. Get a coach at thebitcoinway.com. A member of their team will walk you through exactly what I'm talking about. Just use the QR code and someone will reach out and give you all the tools that you need to protect this asset that's going to be worth a lot more in the future. And if you haven't already done so, think about acquiring Bitcoin in as many ways as possible. Working for it, buying Bitcoin through spot products, and through Bitcoin mining. Except you don't want to do that on your own. Outsource it to the team at SAS Mining. You give them the money, they give you sats. They host your machines, they repair them, they keep them running, and they keep the sats flowing. Use the QR code to get started with SAS Mining today. Who's right? The billionaires or the Bitcoiners? Tell me what you think in the comments. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.